does become available, of course, we'll have it for you here. To that point, we are learning new details now about the deadly police shooting in Charlotte, North Carolina, of a black man yesterday that sparked those violent protests overnight as hundreds of angry protesters poured into the streets there, fighting with police, damaging cars. In fact, as you can see, they're blocking a major highway at one point. Police did use tear gas to break up the crowds, though the crowds did push through various police lines. The victim in question, 43-year-old Keith Lamont Scott. Police say that he got out of his car holding a gun. Officials have stressed that Scott ignored officers' instructions and posed a threat to their safety.
The officers gave loud, clear, verbal commands, which were also heard by many of the witnesses. They were instructing the subject, once he got out of the vehicle, to drop the weapon. In spite of the verbal commands, Mr. Scott, as I said, exited his vehicle armed with a handgun as the officers continued to yell at him to drop it. He stepped out, posing a threat to the officers, and Officer Brentley Vinson subsequently fired his weapon, striking the subject.
Again, that is Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Chief Kerr Putney there. This is the officer to whom he was referring, Officer Brentley Vinson, the officer involved with regard to this shooting. He has been placed, as you heard, on administrative leave. Officials say that Officer Vinson was not wearing a body camera at the time of the shooting, though 3 other officers, at least in full uniform, may have been wearing those videos. Scott's family, meanwhile, is telling a very different story. They claim that Keith Scott was holding but a book and not a weapon, though police say that they have recovered a weapon at the scene of the shooting and no book. David Begnaud has been covering this for us, now joins us over the phone. And again, David, what did you make of what the police chief both shared with the assembled press corps there and what he did not?
Well, let me just play off of what you just said to begin with. The chief said, hey, he wasn't wearing a body camera, but we think there's a possibility some of the other officers may. I just got an interesting note from one of our researchers in New York that you may find interesting. It was just recently in July that the governor of North Carolina, Pat McCrory, signed into law saying that body cameras or dashboard cameras are not public records, meaning the general public has no right to see or obtain copies of them. Only the people who are captured, either their presence or their audio, they can view it. And if they're deceased, their families or representatives can make a request. That's pretty interesting. So even if there is dashboard camera video, we're not entitled to see it.
And he did say that showing that to the family right now, he believed would compromise the integrity of the investigation, and so that will not be shown to Scott family members at this time. Interesting as well, when reporters questioned him specifically as to what he could share regarding some of the video, as he put it, that he has already seen, he did not directly confirm that he could see Keith Scott brandishing a weapon. In his words, he said, I could not see in totality everything that occurred, though he did, again, point out, as I mentioned, a weapon was retrieved at the scene of the shooting, though officers did not find any book.
I get the sense that he's basing everything he's saying off of interviews, primarily interviews with the officers and the people at the scene, right? So he says, hey, the family's saying the guy had a book. We didn't find a book at the scene. What we found at the scene was a handgun. Now, remember, North Carolina is an open carry state, meaning you have got the right to carry a weapon, especially if it's on your hip. If it's on your hip and the public can see you carrying it, it's your right. You can do it. It doesn't matter, okay? We don't know if he had a specialized permit. But I asked the chief one-on-one. I said, Chief, if he didn't have a permit, could he carry in the state of North Carolina? Yes, he could, if it was on his hip and it was clearly displayed. He said, however, when we walk up to you as police officers and we order you to comply with our demands, open carry or not, permit or not, you have to. He didn't, and that's why the shooting happened. That's according to the police chief.
I know you had asked about transparency in that press conference, and he told you that the criminal investigation here does supersede any question of it, at least at this point. I couldn't tell. I believe it was you, David, as well, asking the question with regard to specifically what constitutes an imminent threat? What did he say?
Well, so what I wanted to know is, did the man raise the weapon at the officers? Or was this something where he had it pointed near the ground, or was it near his waist? It wasn't me suggesting that the officers were wrong. It was me saying, hey, okay, so kind of set the situation for me. Is it only when he raises it and points it that you have the right to shoot? Or can you shoot if he's got it in his hand and he just doesn't want to drop it like you're telling him to do? And basically what the police chief said was, when we are giving you commands to put a weapon down and you don't, we can take lethal action. But we still don't know. Where was the gun? Was it near his belt? Was it in his hand? Did he have it? Was he pointing it at the officers? You have to think that if he did, the chief would have said that. Right? Like he raised the weapon and pointed at our officer.
It's what struck me really in listening to the police chief, that again he did not speak to, and again he said he'd seen some of the video, and that it did not show the totality of the situation. But I had expected that he would make clear the specifics of the imminent threat that Officer Vinson did feel in making the decision to shoot Keith Scott. Interestingly, he also did speak, taking us through the timeline, to the protests that we saw that did turn violent last night. He ended his comments initially with saying, the challenge is ours, Charlotte. He thinks our future can be bright, but we have to do it together. His tone certainly struck something different from that of what we heard from Charlotte Mayor Jennifer Roberts.
I have to tell you, the mayor, listen, Josh, the mayor was tweeting last night as all of this chaos was going down. The mayor was tweeting, hey, listen, the community has a right to know. And this morning she was kind of, like, let's come together. Charlotte's all about joining forces and give us some time. The police chief took more of a stance of, here's what I know. I'm very confident in what I know, and that's just what it is. And with all due respect, he can take whatever stance he wants. About those protests last night, I got to tell you, when we were watching them, we started about 8 o'clock Eastern last night watching them, they were peaceful. Yeah, people were protesting, but nobody was getting hurt. And as the chief said today, you've got a right to protest. It's your legal right. However, what they call agitators started infiltrating the crowd. That's when we saw the police move in riot gear. The police used tear gas. Bottles were thrown, according to police, bottles were thrown by the protesters at officers. You had at least 7 officers transported to a local hospital. All injuries are non-life-threatening. And this went well into the morning, Josh. I mean, at 1 a.m., they're standing on Interstate 85, and they lit a bonfire. I mean, there's this huge fire on the interstate. Traffic is stopped. I mean, it's not, 5 o'clock traffic. It's 1 in the morning. But nonetheless, this went on for several hours. Then you had the Walmart that a group of protesters smashed the front window, went in, stole some electronics, and left. And the police chief said, we expect more protests tonight. We expect it, we're planning for it, and we're ready for it.
With regard to, the law to which you referred to initially, I do just want to confirm, under HB 972, audio and video captured by police body cameras or dashboard cameras are not public records. The general public has no right to see them or obtain copies of them. If a person whose image or voice is captured in the recording does request them, if that request is granted, only a look at the recording is possible if the person is deceased, incapacitated, or a minor, a relative, or representative can make the request on their behalf. He, again, the police chief did speak to that, although he said if that request is made by members of Keith Scott's family, they will not be able to allow them to see them until the integrity of the investigation, at least as it is believed by the police, is no longer impacted. Again, as you mentioned as well, we do expect, or it seemed the police did seem to think it was a fait accompli, that protests will continue in Charlotte throughout the day. David Begnaud, I know that you will be on top of all of it for us. We appreciate the time.